I plan to discuss about some interesting and simple aspects of wavelets that as a tool to use image processing applications. And I will show you some examples also towards the end of this lecture. So as we all know about Fourier series representation of a periodic function with a certain period L. So here, what I'm trying to say is, if we have a function f, that function can be expressed in terms of cosine functions and sine functions. So on the right hand side, it is an infinite series, but we are trying to approximate the left function that we are unaware of. So that is an arbitrary function unaware of, but we try to approximate using the known functions that are nice in some sense, and cosines and sine functions. So we are interested in knowing what is the strength of each function. Cos and sine are ingredient in it. So this is the strength of cosine 2 pi nx by L in this function, and this part is the how much the constant function 1 is correlated with this function. Similarly, Bn also, and we usually play this technique to find these coefficients ans, bns, and this a naught. What does this mean? An is actually, we are looking at the correlation between f and this cosine function at certain level of modes. That means some level of oscillation. So that level is there will be an n missing here, cos pi n sine 2 pi nx. So you are measuring the correlation between this function and the unknown function, and this series representation we are familiar with. So if we look at a finite sum of this right hand side series, that will give you an approximation to this function. So this technique we always use in Fourier series approximation to a periodic function with certain period. For the time being, you can have an example. Look at a square wave. This is a square wave with period pi. So if you plot this, you can see that in between 0 and pi by 2, this is -1, and pi by 2 and pi, this is 2. And once we take a Fourier approximation to this function, this will be up to n equal to 5 terms. This will be the series representation. Being this a series, is a periodic function that is that can be expressed in terms of a sine series. And here this is the partial sum of the infinite series at n equal to 10 steps. So this approximation is weaker than this approximation. So as n gets increasing, you are getting better approximations to this function. That is what we play all the time. So this is the visualization of a Fourier approximation. So when I look into the original square wave that I have shown you, it is in blue color, and I'm trying to approximate each for partial sums. So that means the original function is behind the or in green in blue color, so that function is trying to approximate using many nicely defined partial sums in terms of sines and cosines. So to work with this, instead of working with this function, the periodic function unknown one, you can depend on either of these smooth functions to work with. So the properties of the square wave will behave almost the same, that usage is very important, almost the same on these partial sums to a certain level. So whenever we increase this n, we have better approximations. That is what we all familiar in Fourier analysis and Fourier approximation. Now, what will be the discrete analog of this technique? So let us think about Cn. Cn stands for n sample values of real complex numbers. N sample values of complex numbers. Z0, Zn minus 1. But I'm making an assumption that to the left of this sequence, so this is considered as an infinite sequence, but towards the next entry of Zn plus 1 is Z of 0. Z of 0 again. That is what I'm using f of f of x plus n is equal to f of x. So you are assuming periodicity on this signal. So let me call this tuple as a function or a signal. So everything is same. So in the same context, so we can call this as a sequence, a finite sequence, or infinite sequence with periodicity, or it's considered as a function, or as a signal. So if you look at this 0, 1, 2, 3, etc. supported, then at this 0th position there will be some value. At 1 there will be some value. 1, 2 there is some other complex number associated with that. So like that it is observed. But as a whole, if you look at a finite, a smooth curve joining them, that will form a function or a signal, right? So you can consider this as a sample taken from a function. So that is the picture you have to keep in your mind. Now, what I'm trying to understand now is looking at the structure of this Cn. So we are familiar with the vector space structure of this Cn. So if we take two objects of the same kind, you can make additions coordinate wise and scalar multiplication also coordinate wise. If you take a complex number, then you can multiply with this complex number in each component. So that you can define scalar multiplication and vector addition. So with respect to these two operations, you can see that this forms a vector space. In addition to that, you can define inner product of two elements Z and W, defined as summation n from 0 to n minus 1 Z of n W of n conjugate. So we can verify that this definition gives an inner product on this space, and you can adjoin this inner product with this space Cn, and you can call this as an inner product space. And this inner product induces a norm on the space, so that you can talk about the two norm of this two norm associated with this Cn. So what I'm trying to emphasize at this moment is you can see that this Cn together with this particular inner product defined is forming a Hilbert space structure. Hilbert space structure. What is the meaning of Hilbert space? So with respect to this inner product, that defines a norm on the space, and this norm will be having the property that with respect to this norm, this forms a complete space, complete norm-linear space. There is no question of convergence, because this here we are considering a finite sum. Like that you can think. Now, I'm interested in defining Fourier transform of this particular discrete signal. What do you mean by a Fourier transform? So we know that whenever we have a vector space structure, you can think of basis for that vector space. Here also we are interested in looking at a basis which is nicely handy basis. So here we want to represent any element in terms of that basis. And as we did in the first approximation, in the first beginning slides, we are interested in looking at Z as a combination of this vector. Z is writing as a combination of basis elements. Let me call this basis as Fm. Fm is my basis, but Fm is, I'm defining as, I'll show you what the definition of Fm later in the next slide. And I am interested in looking at 0 to n-1 ZFM Fm. But this ZFM is the strength of each basis element. Okay, so for understanding this strength, I define a transform of this signal as Z hat of m is equal to summation n from 0 to n-1 Z of n into e raised to minus 2 pi I mn by capital N. So this defines a transform between Cn to Cn. Okay, so if we supply this type of a signal, you are getting another signal of the same space, which we call as a discrete Fourier transform of the signal Z. So this is the first attention you have to keep in your mind. We are transforming an sample of n data to another sample of n data. What is the relevance? That is what I told you. This is the interest. Fm of n is this basis elements. So each F1, F0, F1, F2, etc., Fn-1 form an orthogonal basis for Cn. This is known as the Fourier basis for Cn. So the idea is you are trying to approximate an unknown signal in terms of this non functions. So, and if you write your unknown signal Z, you are getting Z hat of m into Fm of Fm. So this is your representation in terms of a Fourier basis for the signal. What is the meaning of this transformation? Can we achieve this via some simple linear algebra? So let us look at the summation I have written. M equal to n equal to 0 to n-1. Z hat of m is summation e raised to minus 2 pi I mn into mn by capital N into Z of n. But this can be viewed as e raised to minus 2 pi I by n, the whole power mn into Zn. So you can see that this is a matrix multiplication of Zn. We are multiplying the signal, the unknown, the given signal with a matrix. What that matrix is, I'm multiplying, I'm looking at a matrix with entries. First row entry are all ones and first column entries are all ones. Why? Because m and n are considered to be, m is allowed to vary, then you are getting all the values on the first row, and n is allowed to vary, then you are getting all the columns in the all the entries in this first column. So 0, so n starts from 0 and m also starts from 0. So this is e raised to 0, 1. And in the first row, either m or n is 0. So you will get 1 on the first row, and in this first column, n is 0. So you are getting 1. And other entries are this, or mnth entry of that matrix is e raised to minus 2 pi I by n, the whole power mn. And you form this matrix so as to multiply the given signal. So this is your given signal. And if we multiply this matrix to this signal, we produce the Fourier transform. This is Fourier transform. This is your Fourier transform, DFT, discrete Fourier transform. But this is the process you want to do when you want to calculate the discrete Fourier transform of a given signal. Okay, so if you look at certain cases when n is equal to 2 and 4, this is n equal to 2 case and this is n equal to 4 case, the matrices will be this. This is a matrix with complex entries. When you multiply that, you will get the corresponding discrete Fourier transforms. So if you multiply with that, you will get the Fourier transform of that signal given. Now the question is, can we revert? So once you move from a signal to its Fourier transform by multiplying with this matrix, the next question is, can we reconstruct or move back from the discrete Fourier transform DFT to the original signal back? The answer is yes, we can, but in certain situation, provided the given matrix is invertible. So what we are doing is, I will get an element y when I multiply a matrix to a vector. So if I multiply ax or find ax, if you want to find x back from the image, you need to look at A inverse of y. So this reversion is possible in certain situations, not always possible. Okay, so that we have to consider. So this is what the definition of inverse Fourier transform. So if we have the definition of Fourier transform, in the similar way, you can keep this in your mind so that you can revert. So this reversion is also possible. Inverse discrete Fourier transform is possible. Yeah. So this is the example. So this is matrix W4 in C4. This is the given signal 1 0 minus 3 4, and multiplying with this 1 0 minus 3 4, and you can see that the Fourier transform will be to this 2 4 plus 4i minus 6 4 minus 4i. Now if you want to look at the original signal back from this Fourier transform, you have to use this matrix. This matrix is 1 by n into Wn conjugate. So Wn is already we defined. So this is the process we have to play. So give an example of a function, a signal with 128 samples. So let me consider z of n is equal to cosine 2 pi 7n by 128 plus 4 into cosine 2 pi into 12n by 128. This is the given signal with 128 samples. So it's a simple case. What we are trying to find is discrete Fourier transform. That means you want to write this signal in terms of the Fourier basis. So what is your Fourier basis? E raised to 2 pi mn by capital N. N is 128 here. So you are interested in writing this part using Euler formula. Cos theta is equal to e raised to I theta plus e raised to minus I theta. So you are converting cosine function using Euler formula, exponential function. So you can write this as 1 by 2 into this. So write it here, and 4 times cosine using this same formula, so that you can see that this is 4 into 1 by 2 into e raised to 2 pi I 12n by 128 plus this. And if you make some arrangements, so you are considering e raised to 2 pi I minus 7, but minus 7 is equal to, it is not in the range of under consideration, but we assume the periodicity. So you consider minus 7 as 121 in the modular arithmetic of 128. So you can write 64 into e raised to 2 pi I into 7n by 128 is here, and this is 64 into e raised to 2 pi I 121 n by 128. I have taken this 128 outside because I am looking for 1 by capital N into e raised to 2 pi I mn divided by capital N. This will be my Fourier basis. So I'm trying to convert this cosine function in terms of this. So for that, I took 1 by 128 outside. So here 1 by 2 is expected as the coefficient of this, and this will be write 64 here, and make the same arrangements here. 4 into 1 by 2 is 256 by 128. So write that. So what we are observing is the given signal is having only four coefficients in terms of the Fourier basis. So what are the strengths? E raised to 2 pi I into 7. M equal to 7, there is a non-zero coefficient. When m is equal to 121, there is a coefficient, and 12, m is equal to 12, there is a coefficient, and 126, 116 also there is a coefficient, and the coefficients are this. These are the coefficients at the respective locations. So what is the meaning of that? So I have plotted that given signal. When I look at this particular signal, it will look like this, and this is your Zn. And when I find the Fourier transform of that, you can see that here at this point, yeah, at 7 there is a strength that is 64, known to be 64. So this is the strength. So this gives you the amplitude of that coefficient, and this is this is 16. Okay, and when I move on the domain to the right, there are no coefficients, or we have zero coefficients throughout. But we will see there is a coefficient on 121, and yeah, I forgot that location. What was that? Yeah, anyway, this 16, 128 minus 60, that is this. So this is the strength. So we can see that there is symmetry on the Fourier representation. You can see the symmetry. This is the Fourier transform. So what is the advantage of having this? So what is the meaning of how we look at this data, this information? What we are trying to say is this signal is having this particular level of oscillation. This particular signal is having this level of oscillation, and this level of oscillation also the ingredient in this particular signal. So if you want to remove certain oscillations from the signal, you can do it from the Fourier domain. So if you want to make or nullify the certain oscillation from the given signal, you can make this this value to be 0. If you make this value to be 0 and this value to be 0, then you are interested in keeping only the two values, two strengths, so that you can remove a particular oscillation from your signal. So that is also observed from the next slide. This slide is I have removed the two frequencies from from either ends. So only I kept only these two oscillations. That means and I constructed and reconstructed the signal from the filtered Fourier transform, and that will be having this particular nature. So the previous signal was this. This is having two different kinds of oscillations, but this is having only a single oscillation. This is the way we perform to nullify certain oscillations from signals. We can look at what we are performing it in this. So we are interested in looking at cosine function and sine functions. E power 2 pi I mn is a combination of cosines and sines. But what happens to this function when I change the values of m? So I'll show you certain examples. So this is cos 2 pi n by 16. If we choose 16 samples, so this will be cos 2 pi n by 16 and 2 n by 16, cos 2 pi 2 n by 16. So it is having oscillation, increased oscillation. And if you change the values of m, so that you can create oscillations in the fundamental functions cosine. Similarly, you can make it in the case of sine functions also. And once you move from 0 to 7, you are having many oscillations. But when I look into 8, you are having maximum oscillation. And slowly, the number of oscillations will decrease, start decreasing, and it changes its oscillation till since we reach the right end. So that same thing happens in both the functions sine and cosine. So you can change the number of oscillations by increasing the values of m. So for this particular case, signal for n is equal to 16 is the maximum oscillation possible at the middle of the range 16. That means at 8, you are having maximum oscillations. And if you move from the left and move towards left, you have less number of oscillations than the middle point, and towards the right also you are having less number of oscillations when compared to the middle one. What it means is we move on to the middle from 0 to n by 2, the closest integer. Yeah, you have to look at closest integer n by 2. The function oscillates more and more rapidly, more and more. And towards the right half, you can see that e power mn I mn by n will be the same as e raised to minus 2 pi I nk by n. So for this case equal to n minus n. So the idea is what I'm trying to emphasize is you can see the oscillations will be maximum at the middle. So the middle point contains maximum oscillations, means if you can read the discrete Fourier transform like this. Once you transform your signal to the Fourier domain, whenever you have some amplitude towards the middle of the Fourier spectrum, you can say that your signal is having a high frequency component ingredient in it. Okay, so that is the key point you have to see. The problem now is if you want to calculate the Fourier transform, discrete Fourier transform, you have to make a matrix multiplication. If it is n by n matrix, if it is an n by n matrix, and you want to multiply this matrix to a vector of length n, so as to produce the discrete Fourier transform. This is what the actual work we have to perform. But matrix multiplication is a slow process when in a complete computational point of view. That means if you want to make the multiplication possible, you have to make n square complex multiplications. N square complex multiplication. This coordinate, this number should multiply here and so on. So that n square multiplications are required to compute z hat. If this n is very large, that job will be very tedious and time consuming. So we need some modifications to this process. So we want to calculate it in a fast way. Okay. So what is the method we can use so as to increase the speed in computation? So there is a technique known as fast Fourier transform, provided we have a signal with even length. If we have a signal with even length, you can produce the odd parts and even parts respectively from the given signal. UK is z of 2k. That means you are choosing the values or data values falls on the even positions and odd positions respectively, and you are making two different signals of length half that of the original one. So that is what we are performing, and we calculate the Fourier transform, discrete Fourier transform of the newly constructed signal using this matrix multiplication, not Wm. It is not Wn. This is Wm. This n by 2. That n by 2 is possible when this is even number. So make discrete Fourier transforms of u hat and v hat separately, and you can construct the Fourier transform of this given z from this u hat and v hat. Using this following formula, z hat of m is equal to u hat of m plus e raised to minus 2 pi I m by capital N into v hat of m. And this what is this? Actually, we want to calculate the Fourier spectrum of the signal z. So for the half values, you will have this value replaced, u hat of m plus e raised to minus 2 pi I m by n into v hat of m. So half values will be replaced with this, and the rest will be this. The rest of the values will be replaced with this. So here there is only one complex multiplication, and there is an addition. Okay. So this will be increasing your speed of computation of the Fourier transform. So that is the logic. So keep this figure in your mind. So we have Z0, Z2, Z6, Z8. This is the n by 2 samples taken from the original one and finding the discrete Fourier transform of that. And these are the even position values and these are the odd position values, so as to calculate. So Z hat of 0, the Fourier transform of Z at 0 will be equal to calculate Z of 0 and even Z of 0 plus odd this. So you have to multiply e raised to minus 2 pi I by n and e raised to minus 2 pi I n. One side you are adding and the other side you are subtracting. So this is the way to improve the speed of computation. Now what is the advantage of having this fast computation is, whenever we have an even number, we can increase the speed by at most n square by 2. Half number of multiplications are required to calculate the Fourier transform in fast Fourier transform algorithm. So what will be the advantage? So for looking at certain operators, so in the beginning I have mentioned about the Fourier basis, and the other entries are obtained by, yeah, let me look at this translation operator. So what do you mean by a translation operator? So whenever we have a signal, so you can define Rk of z as z of n minus k. This actually shift. So if we have certain values, some values in the given, some values given, so n minus k for different choices of k, this shifts the signal to the right or to the left, depends on the nature of k. So this is what shift operator is, okay, or translation operator is. And when I look at the Fourier transform of this translation operator, this will be a complex multiplication with this exponential multiplied to the Fourier transform. That means it stands for a modulation in the Fourier domain. So translation. So now you have to keep in your mind that we have two domains. One is the spatial domain or time domain we call, and the Fourier domain. Fourier domain, and you are trying to look at the behavior of certain operators in this domain as well as in this domain. So whenever we have translation of signal in this domain, that will be reflected in this particular domain as a modulation. So that is the idea. And Z hat, Z bar means the conjugate of each complex numbers in the n tuple. So that we will use later. So if you look at the Fourier transform of this conjugate of the signal, that will be equal to Z hat of minus M conjugate. So it will be a reflected conjugate. Okay, so yeah, that we'll use later. So this is the thing. So if you want to find the Fourier transform, you just use the previous definition so as to calculate the Fourier domain, Fourier representation of translation operator. So an operator is said to be a translation invariant if translation is having no effect in the operator. That is what translation invariant operator is. That means if you define T as a map between Cn and Cn, it is translation invariant, means you are performing a translation before applying this operator. So you performed a translation that is equivalent to the the operator applied to the Z and perform the translation. Okay, that means you can interchange the roles of this T and RK, or they are commutative in one sense. Okay, so this type of operators are known as translation invariant operators, and we can see that every translation invariant operators are diagonalizable using Fourier basis. Mathematic point of view, you can see that. So if you have a function h of t here, another function f of t is here, and you want to make the convolution of that. So look at this. So one function is moving on to the other. So if we look at this portion, there is some influence on both the functions. So h of t into h of t minus lambda you are making. That means you move the one function on the second one. So if it is like that, you can see that there is a certain area formed. So you are interested in how much area it is formed. So that means that is traced in this third curve. So this will be the convolution of this function and the second function. So once you move, you can see that the area is getting increased and reaches a maximum value, and that maximum value is kept constant throughout. So that is the behavior you can see. So the same thing is this is the way you want to look at convolution. So it is a way to say the weighted moving average or weighted average. So these are the special features of the Fourier basis. Translation invariant operators can be diagonalized, and translation operator can be viewed as a convolution operator, and translation invariant operator as a Fourier multiplier operator, and the components of Fourier basis can be computed quickly using f of t. So the components of Fourier basis can be computed quickly. So that is the advantage we focus. And the point is Fourier basis elements are spatially localized. So it's a global analysis. And the question is, can we find a basis which is both spatially localized and frequency localized? Localized in the sense, if we look at Fourier representation, so every element you are considering is the sine function and cosine function. So if you find the Fourier transform, you are having certain certain peaks at certain locations. So if you make this value 0 and trying to reconstruct the function, you can reconstruct the signal using certain values avoided. If you avoid these values, the avoidance will get reflected globally in the reconstructed signal. So that is a serious disadvantage of Fourier transform, and we are interested in forming a basis which is localized in frequency, and spatial localization is also demanded. The idea is we can look for spatially localized and frequency localized signals. So before that, I just define what a conjugate reflection is. Earlier, I have mentioned the conjugate of a reflection is. So that I am defining it using a tilde notation. So that is a conjugate reflection. So reflected conjugate. So that is what the meaning is. And if you look at the Fourier transform, and this can be verified, is Z tilde hat is Z hat of n conjugate. So the Fourier domain, it is the conjugate. The idea is, so you are trying to look at writing any function or any signal Z using this k belongs to Z RK W. That means your basic aim is to create a basis in such a way that that basis is obtained from the translates of a single function, single element W. Okay, so that is your point. So if we construct that basis using the translation function, translation operator, it is nice, and you can observe that the strengths can be computed. Strengths are this when you have this this basis, and that strength is actually the convolution of a reflected function, reflected W, convoluted to the original signal Z star W tilde. But this can be calculated easily, because if you look at Z star W hat, it is Z hat into W hat. So in this point, you can depend on fast Fourier transform to perform the computation easily. So that you can calculate the coefficients or strengths of each basis elements in terms of the convolution, or in terms of the fast Fourier transform. So that is the purpose. So the basic idea is to create an orthonormal basis. You might be knowing what an orthonormal basis is. So B is this, it's an orthonormal basis. Then we have this representation in a Hilbert space. Okay, that is the ultimate plan. But when I think about trying to generate a translations of a single function while forming an orthonormal basis, that should satisfy W hat of n should be 1. That means in the Fourier domain, the strength of the Fourier transform should be 1. But that does not fulfill our purpose. Why? We are interested in constructing a basis which is both spatially localized and frequency localized. If this is the situation, the signal will not be frequency localized. Frequency localized means you have to have a certain non-negative, non-zero values at certain small location. So that is the idea. But this is a serious disappointment. So you cannot construct a basis from a single function by using a translations of a single signal. So how to overcome this this situation? So that can be overlooked at by looking at the even translations of elements. Okay, so we are trying to formulate a sequence of vectors so that take W from Cn and make 2k translations instead of integer translations. So that forms an orthonormal set with m elements if and only if this quadrature condition is satisfied. This condition is satisfied. If this condition is satisfied, you have m elements that are orthonormal set. Okay, and the rest of the m elements can be constructed using another certain modifications. So that can be achieved. Yeah, is it? Yeah, I skipped the proof of this, but you can construct the 2k translations of u. Consider 2k translations of u that forms m elements, and you can define v from the given u so that you can construct the rest of the m elements, so that the union of these set of elements R2ku and R2kv forms an orthonormal basis of Cn. So this is the idea. So the thing we played is, you started with some u and generated R2kus, and that fulfills the half part, and the rest of the part will be catched using R2kv, where v is defined in terms of u. So the role play is from the part of u. Okay, so that is a crucial point. So here we will accomplish this using two different operators, namely the downsampling operation and the upsampling operation. Downsampling is just pick all the even position values, and upsampling is you insert zeros in the odd positions of a signal. So if you perform this operation on a signal, the length of the signal will get doubled, and if you perform decimation operator, your length of the signal will get half. So that is the immediate explanation to this two operators, downsampling and upsampling. So here this is one signal given, and you look at the value obtained at 0 and second location 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, and so on. The values coming at the odd positions are dropped. So that is what the decimation operator. So that you can get half the samples, half the sample value. The idea of decomposing the signal using these two vectors can be diagrammatically shown in like this. So if this is your signal coming, you take this signal and make a convolution of v tilde, and we are interested in z convolution with v tilde that forms the coefficient z R2kv. So this convolution is performed here and downsampled. Downsampling makes the coefficient. So these are the strengths at one level of decomposition. So this gives you each strength of these elements in the basis, and respectively R2k u tilde is convoluted and downsampled. So that will give you the next set of coefficients. So this is the analysis phase. This part, half part of the decomposition can be performed like this. And if you want to make some filtering process here with the help of these coefficients, do it. And after performing certain operations and process here, you can reconstruct your signal back using this upsample that filtered one, then convolute with V and U respectively, so that you can reconstruct Z back. So that is the whole approach you have to use in the decomposition phase as well as in the reconstruction phase. So the idea we comprise in terms of a multi-resolution analysis. So multi-resolution analysis means if we look at L2 of R, it is another space which is a Hilbert space. L2 of R is a Hilbert space. In the similar fashion we did in the discrete case, you can think of L2 of R as a Hilbert space with the operations of equivalence classes of square integrable functions defined on R. Integral over R, f of t, g of t bar dt. So this defines an inner product, hence a norm, and so on. So you can see that this is a Hilbert space, and we are interested in looking at a sequence of subspaces of L2 of R having the following properties. So at this level in the sense I have a certain location of a subspace, fixed subspace, and if you change your attention so that you can move on to the other spaces, that means you are changing your resolutions. So the resolutions. So it is one subspace is contained in the other, and the second one is contained in the other, so that you can see a sequence of subspaces of L2 of R having these properties: monotonicity. And the second property is we have to have a function phi in this space such that the translations of that function forms an orthonormal set. So V0 is the initial reference stage. So that V0 can be seen as a sequence of it's an orthonormal, sorry, have a specific function whose translations generate an orthonormal set, and this is V0. So for the time being, you can view V0 like this, and you can jump from this V0 to this V1 via a dilation. So what I'm going to define is next dilation. The word dilation stands for, if you have a function f in V0, you resolve x with 2 raised to jx. So if you multiply x with 2 power j, you will land on a function in Vj. So that is a speciality. And if you change 2 raised to minus j, that will give you a space at which you are on the left side of the reference, V0. So you can move from V0 to either to the right or to the left. So that is dilation means. And the trivial intersection stands for intersection of these spaces at all resolutions will be 0. And take the union of these spaces, take the closure that will fill the entire space L2 of R. So whenever we have such a sequence of subspaces of L2 of R, you can say that that sequence is a multi-resolution of the space. So what is the key ingredient in the multi-resolution is Vj is a multi-resolution means you have to have a function phi known as the scaling sequence, scaling function that have the property that root of 2 into summation k belongs to z u of k into phi of 2x minus k. So that means you can construct phi with its dilated copies, dilated translated copies. So that's the summation. That means you are trying to represent elements in Vj using elements in a space which is having a lower resolution. So that is the plan you are making. So for that, the function should satisfy this condition, and this condition is satisfied, that particular functions are known as refinable functions. Refinable functions. So once you have this refinable function in your hand, you can perform, or you can create multi-resolution analysis on any space, any Hilbert space, and you can perform this wavelet analysis. And you can calculate so VKs from this UK. These UKs are known as the scaling sequence. So you can construct VKs from this scaling sequence so as to generate another function named psi. This is known as wavelet. Okay, so this is a refinable function or scaling function. So once you have scaling function and the wavelet function, you can perform wavelet analysis. Okay, so what is the role of scaling function? It is giving an approximation. It is trying to construct an approximation on the space with a specific resolution J, and you will lose certain information when you change your resolution. So that information can be catched with the help of this wavelet. That is the whole idea you have to keep in your mind. So this is the orthonormal set in L2FR, this size 0K. So once you have wavelet, you can look at the translations, all the translations that forms W0, that combinations forms W0. So what we are trying to emphasize is, if we have V0 and W0 defined, so their direct sum will give you V1. So what is the meaning of this? So any function in the space V1 can be catched from the elements in V0, direct sum elements in W0. This V0 and W0. So this is an approximation space, and this is W0 can be viewed as the orthogonal complement of this V0 when we move from the lower resolution level to the higher resolution level. So Vj plus 1 can be written like Vj direct sum Wj. So that is the way. So if you have a function in L2FR, you can approximate. So as we did in the Fourier case, you can make the approximation here also once you have the function defined on L2FR. Okay, so this function can be approximated using these sequences. So we define two operators. So phi jk's actually produces the approximation space Vj, and this combination. So let me write this as an approximation. So projecting it to the fx is projecting. Fx is projecting, but Pj stands for the projected f. So Pj of f is written as fx phi jk of x into phi jk of x. So this is the projection or approximation to the respective space. And if we have Wj, that approximation, Wj projection can also be used as this. K belongs to Z, fx psi jkx, psi jkx. So what is this? This is having the process when you resolve your function to a level 2 raised to j, then you are moving from one space to the other and the next to the next and so on. So when 2 raised to j goes to 0, we lose all the details of the function, and you have limit j tends to minus infinity norm of Pj of x, Pj f is 0. So intuitively, when resolution are going to 0, you will lose the information of the signal. And if you resolve better, 2 raised to j goes to infinity, then the signal approximation converges to the original signal. Okay, like in the Fourier case we did in the beginning. So here we have f, the original one given, and you want to calculate the difference between the original one and the projected one. The difference in norm is almost to the zero as j tends to infinity. That is what we mean in this particular context. So the most applications of wavelet basis exploit their ability to efficiently approximate particular classes of functions with few non-zero wavelet coefficients. So the ultimate aim is to look at the Fourier coefficients f psi j case. F psi j case. So what we are trying to say is we have to look at minimum number of these coefficients, minimum number of non-zero wavelet coefficients to perform this task. So the ultimate aim is to minimize the number of coefficients that are negligible or close to zero. And that problem depends on certain aspects of the function f, as well as the functions, refinable functions, as well as the wavelet. So we are trying to look at the wavelet having certain sides of support. That means support means if you have a wavelet here, the support means the function, the domain of the psi, which is having non-zero influence. So that is what the support is. So these properties, vanishing moment property and the size of support of the wavelet we selected, is highly influential when we make this coefficient psi jk that are having minimum values and minimum strength. So what is the meaning of vanishing moment property? Vanishing moment property means you are looking at the correlation with the polynomials. So consider the polynomials x raised to k and correlate psi k. So your psi, the wavelet function, is highly matched with the polynomials up to the order p. Then that function psi is having p vanishing moments. Okay, so that is intuitively the meaning of function having p vanishing moments. And if we take a regular function, then psi has enough vanishing moments, and psi has enough vanishing moments, then these coefficients are very small at fine scales 2 raised to j. So that is the connection between the vanishing moment and these wavelet coefficients. And if the function is locally in n times continuously differentiable function, that means that are smooth functions, then we can approximate this function using a Taylor polynomial of degree n. So you might have seen this in Weierstrass approximation theorem and some other approximation techniques. So if we have a continuous function in the closed bounded interval AB, that can be approximated using Bernstein polynomials. So that idea I just post here for revision. So this wavelet is in hand, and you are trying to resolve the function. Resolve the function means you are changing the resolution. So if you have the function psi initially this, and you are changing the domain into this domain, and you can see that your function will get supported somewhere, something like this. You are trying to look at the changed domain so that your function will be highly localized. So this is the way you mean as a resolution. So that is represented mathematically like this. Psi jk will be 1 by 2 power j. So this part is for keeping the normality of the basis elements. And if we perform this, these are the coefficients. So if we have a singularity at t naught, the inside this support, if you have t naught in which is a singularity, then this coefficients will be having larger amplitude. So that point you have to note. And psi has compact support of size k, psi jk have compact support, but at the 2 power jth level. So at the final scale 2 raised to j, there will be k wavelets, which includes this singular point t naught. So you can see with certain observations. So you think about that. So to minimize the number of high amplitude coefficients, we must reduce the support size of psi. So the ultimate plan is to reduce the number of high amplitude coefficients. For that, we have to reduce the size of the support of the wavelet we selected. And to construct an approximate or appropriate wavelet with these properties, these are the desirable properties, what we do. How do we construct a wavelet with p vanishing moments and a better support, convex support? So to fulfill that, you have to look at the coefficients, or you have to look at the scaling sequence, or you have to look at the filters. So whenever we have a conjugate mirror filter h of n, we relate these properties to these conditions on h hat of omega. H hat of omega stands for the Fourier transform of this conjugate mirror filter. If psi has p vanishing moments, this h hat of omega will also have p minus 1 derivatives are its first p minus 1 derivatives are 0 at w equal to pi. So these are equivalent conditions. Whenever we have a psi which is having a p vanishing moments, then correspondingly the filter is having first p minus 1 derivatives will be having derivatives at 0 at w is equal to pi in the Fourier domain. So this is what we want to look at the nature of support and the vanishing moment property. This point we have to keep in your mind. Psi has p vanishing moments, then h hat must have 0 of order p at w equal to pi. And we want to look at which polynomial of minimal size is having this particular property. So if you look at 1 plus e raised to minus I omega the whole power p, this is a single polynomial. If you differentiate this, e raised to minus I pi will be e raised to I pi's cos pi minus I sin pi. So cos pi is -1. So 1 plus minus 1 will be 0. So if you differentiate it p times, that will satisfy the requirement. So if you take this polynomial that is having p zeros at w is equal to pi, that is a key observation. So if we have our filter h whose Fourier transform will be √2 into, so h1 plus e raised to minus I omega by 2 the whole power p into some other polynomial in e raised to minus I omega. So you are looking at a polynomial, but we have to have p vanishing moments also. So h hat omega should satisfy this condition. Okay, and we want to construct this r e raised to minus I omega. How do we calculate it, or how do we find it? So Dobeschi proved that minimum degree of this polynomial is p minus 1. So that is the observation from Ingrid Dobeschi, a famous mathematician in this area. And if you look at the real filters, the h hat of omega square is p cos omega. It's a polynomial. This stands for a polynomial in cos omega. Okay. And r e raised to minus I omega the whole square is again a polynomial in cos omega. Why? Because we demand this as an even polynomial. So this is an even polynomial. Okay, so even function is approximated in terms of the even function cosine function. So h hat of omega square is polynomial in cos omega, and the same happens for it is h hat of omega is again in terms of r e raised to minus I omega square. So this is again a polynomial in cos omega, but cosine function is in terms of sine square. Cos 2 theta is equal to sine. I have to write it. 1 plus cos 2 theta divided by 2 is I write cosine 1 minus cosine 2 theta divided by 2 is equal to sine square theta. So making use of this, you can say that cosine function is in terms of, it's a polynomial in sine square omega by 2. And making some arrangements in the expression 1 plus e raised to minus I omega by 2 is equal to e raised to minus I omega by 2 into e raised to I omega by 2 plus e raised to minus I omega by 2 divided by 2. So if you might multiply this, you will get 1 here. And if you multiply this with this, you will get e raised to minus I omega here. So it is the same thing. So being the expression written earlier, h hat of omega square is equal to 2 into cosine omega by 2 the whole power 2p into p of sine square omega by 2. This is again a polynomial in sine square omega by 2. So this is the observation Dobeschi made. And using cosine function, cos a plus b is cos a cos b minus sin a sin b. You can write cosine omega plus pi divided by 2 is minus sine omega by 2, and sine omega plus pi by 2 is cosine omega by 2. And h of omega by omega plus pi the whole square can be expressed as 2 times cosine omega plus pi divided by 2 raised to p, 2p into this representation. And you make some arrangements here so that cosine is written in terms of sine square. So using this, and here also sine square is cos square, in terms of cos square you can write because of this property, and 2 sine square omega by 2 raised to p into p of 1 minus sine square omega by 2. So that means the quadrature condition we wrote earlier is h hat of omega square plus h hat of omega plus pi the whole square is equal to 2 is equivalent to. So remember, in the discrete case I have written here m, but in the continuous case you can see that it is if we consider a situation with length 0 to 2 pi, to the middle it is pi. So pi rotation. So like that you will keep in your mind. So this is the quadrature condition, and we demand this quadrature condition to fulfill so that you are looking for a polynomial which clearly places r of e raised to I omega. But this is equivalent to this condition, o square omega by 2 raised to p into p sine square omega by 2 plus sine square omega by 2 raised to p into a polynomial. So what does this mean? This is equivalent to 1 minus y power p into p of y plus y raised to p into p of 1 minus y equal to 1. So if you choose y as sine square omega by 2 that lies in between 0 and 1, you can say that cos square omega by 2 is 1 minus sine square. Again, 1 minus sine square, 1 minus y raised to p into y raised to p into this. So the quadrature condition can be brilliantly transformed into a polynomial expression like this, so as you can the question of creating a Fourier series h hat of omega is looking for a positive polynomial of this kind, a polynomial satisfying this condition. But this condition is satisfied using Bezout's theorem. Bezout's theorem on polynomials. Bezout's theorem is on polynomials is a classical result. This is saying that whenever we have two polynomials of degree n1 and n2 with common zeros, with no common zeros, that means they are not intersecting, with no common zeros, then there exist two unique polynomials p1 and p2 of degrees n2 minus 1 and n1 minus 1, which satisfies this condition. This is a classical result. The proof is very technical, and I just pause this theorem so as to see whether you can prove it. So this is the key idea Dobeschi used to construct her window function. So now we move on to our attention to the two-dimensional situation of images. So how we look at things. So how we have the visual perception happening. So the visual activity of human eyes are actually happening at the center. So So there are so many photoreceptors in our eyes. So when you look at these four objects, the light on those objects fall and reflected to our eyes, and these photoreceptors spread all over your retina is catch that information, and that information is carried over to your brain via optical nerves. So the idea is here the same thing happens in the image frame also. What we mean as, so here we place certain photoreceptors like that. An image can be viewed as a plate containing several photoreceptors, and this photoreceptors receive certain light with certain intensity, and that will be coded at each point. Okay, so that forms a 512 by 512 or 256 by 256. Yeah, that depends. So this is the way you see things. Okay, so if you want to increase your number of informations, that requires more photoreceptors. So in our case, in our eyes, there are latest photoreceptor is at the center and some others on the either side. But if we want to distribute the uniform photoreceptors on your eyes, we require 10,000 times more photoreceptors. But nature is solved an optimum problem there also to minimize the number of photoreceptors fitted in our eyes. This is the logic, and we want to construct the basis of the wavelet type, which we use to analyze these pictures. So this picture is considered as a two-dimensional function, so that you can create the same multi-resolution analysis here also. So we depend on an orthonormal basis of L2 of R. We know what it is, and we call a separable wavelet orthonormal basis of L2 of R2. L2 of R2 means elements are square integrable images. Square integrable images instead of square integrable signals or square integrable functions. So here, what we do is we depend on an orthonormal basis of this kind from the orthonormal basis of L2 of R. So what information we want to look at? So at present we have two functions psi j, j1 n1 and j2 n2 for different scales, and if j1 and j2 are different, they are at the different scales, and n1 and n2 are two integers that represents the translations. Okay, so we will perform translations in two directions. Each direction is x1 and x2, specified as x2. And if you take the product of these two functions, that makes informations of two different scales, 2 raised to j1 and 2 raised to j2 along x1 and x2 respectively. But we are not interested in looking at these products. We are interested in the products at the same level, not in the different levels. So that is the first point, and we will create. So we'll create a separable wavelet basis for performing image representation, image decomposition and construction. So here, look at the image f of x1, x2 at the resolution 2 power j is defined as the orthogonal projection of f onto the space Vj2 that is included in L2 R2. What is Vj2? Vj2 is, I'll show you in the next slide. Vj2 is a subspace of L2 of R2 for the time being, and we will create some separable products of scaling functions phi and the wavelet psi. What do you mean by separable product? How to jump from the one-dimensional setup to the two-dimensional setup? Okay, so for functions in f and g, we have to define tensor product of two functions like this. F tensor g of x1 x2 is defined as f of x1 into g of x2, and this definition we can look at the linearity. So the linearity of linear multiplication of a function mixed with the tensor product. So it will satisfy this property. And distributivity. So here you take sum of two functions. Other two functions g2 and f2 are taken. Then their sum is also considered and tensored. It is same as f1 tensor f2. So distributivity f1 tensor f2 plus f1 tensor g2, g1 tensor f2, g1 tensor g2. So this is known as the distributive property. So whenever we have the basis for L2 of R, you can create a basis for L2 of R2 using this technique, L2 of R tensored with L2 of R, so that if we have En and Em, two orthonormal bases of L2 of R, then take the tensors of each functions En and Em respectively, so that you can form an orthonormal basis of L2 of R2. Okay, that is the point. So Vj2 is just tensor product of the resolution spaces we have seen earlier in the jth level. So we are fixing the same level so that Vj tensor Vj will be Vj2. It is the second level space, and the space Vj2 is the set of finite energy functions that are linear expansions of functions of this kind, separable functions of this kind. Okay, so that is what it means. So this is the technique you have to adopt for jumping from signal analysis point of view to image processing point of view. We have Vj, a multi-resolution approximation of L2 of R. Then Vj2 will be a multi-resolution approximation of L2 of R2. And once we have the scaling function phi associated to the one-dimensional multi-resolution approximation Vj, correspondingly, you can move on to the next level of, or next dimensional, the second dimensional multi-resolution defined by Vj2. It is Vj tensor with Vj. And the same stuff, L2 of R. L2 of R is represented in terms of the wavelet spaces Wj at all levels, at all resolution levels. Okay, like that, you can now define three different wavelets, say psi1, psi2, psi3, which are defined as phi x1, psi x2. That is actually the scaling function phi tensored with the wavelet function psi x1, x2, and the second function is psi tensored with phi x1, x2, and the third one is psi tensored with psi x1, x2. That means you have to look at phi and psi in this way. For constructing phi, you depend on a low pass filter. Low pass filter means a filter that allows low frequencies to come out and high pass frequencies to come out with a high pass filter. So high pass filter is represented in the wavelet domain, and wavelet, so associated with wavelet, and low pass is associated with the approximation. So this is a mixing of low pass and high pass. So this is low pass, high pass, and reversed way, high pass, low pass, and high pass, high pass. So low pass, high pass, low pass, and high pass. These three ways of mixing informations together and forms a new basis known as the detailed space. And that forms an orthonormal basis for L2 of R2. And you make the dilations of these functions, psi1, psi2, psi3, so that you can define the respective multi-resolution in the second dimensional space. So this is the idea you have to keep in your mind. So this is the technique we have to adopt. So we have this sequence of functions phi j1, j2, etc., psi j, m1, m2, etc., orthonormal basis for vj and wj respectively, and this forms the orthonormal basis for the second dimensional detail space wj2. Okay. Now, once we have these spaces, you can adopt the same strategy of representing L2 of R2 in terms of the spaces, direct sum of these detailed spaces at all levels, j's from minus infinity to plus infinity. So this is the representation of the images in L2 of R2. So this is the idea. Now, the same strategy we can follow in the L2 R2 case, multi-resolution. I have explained the same thing, the same multi-resolution properties in the case of images. So, but the dilation will be happening in both the directions. So that is important. If you look at 2 raised to j x1 and 2 raised to j x2, but at the fixed resolution, that is important. And you have to use 2 here also 2, second dimensional. The same thing in the scaling point of view, approximation function phi and approximation function psi. This is wavelet and this is scaling function in the 2-dimensional. And if you want to project, this function to the space spanned by these 2-dimensional functions, phi jk's, you have to perform this. So now you have in hand an orthonormal basis generated from multi-resolution analysis, so that you can project any image. This is an image. You are projecting that image to a space spanned by this set of images. Okay, this is the idea. And if you want to look at QJ operator acting on an image is summation k belongs to z to f psi instead of phi jk psi jk. So this is the idea. Now we will look at certain reference textbooks which deals with these topics. One is Ole Christensen's An Introduction to Frames and Risk Bases, and a simple linear algebraic explanation to the content is available in Michael Frazier, An Introduction to Wavelets through Linear Algebra, and Framelets and Wavelets Applied and Numerical Harmonic Analysis by Binhan. And another book is A Wavelet Tour of Signal Processing by Stephen Mallet. It's a practical perspectively written book by Stephen Mallet. And Ingrid Daubechi is talking about 10 lectures on wavelets. Most of the time, she talk about continuous wavelet transforms and all. So this is the content I have to share, but I will show you one or two examples so that this process can be 1 or 2 examples. That's all. So this code segment I have used from Adira's code set. Thanks to Miss Adira Babu for creating these codes. She is my research student. She wrote this code for representing Daubechi filter. So let me show you. This is the Daubechi filter: A0, A1, A2, A3. These are the 3 non-zero values in the Daubechi filter. And if we construct this Daubechi wavelet using this filter, you can see that, yeah, this is Dobeschi scaling function. Dobeschi scaling function is this. It is having a certain symmetry behavior you can observe. So up to a certain level, you can see the filter, the wavelet function generated by this filter. So this is at a certain level up to 7, but if we increase the precision, you can see that this is the function. Yeah, this is the scaling function and this is the wavelet function. And you can see that there is a symmetry here. So if you observe symmetry, so the half portion is this half portion is having this this way of distribution of these values, but the rest of the values is actually a reflected image of this. So this is what an example of a conjugate mirror filter. Conjugate mirror filter. So this is a continuous plot of that Dobeschi filter. And one interesting example of image analysis is here we have a picture. Yeah, actually that package is not here in this computer. So I'll just show you the work. So I have written, I have loaded a image available in this database, cameraman image. This is a popularly used picture among image processing experts. Coefficients are calculated using Dobeschi wavelet. Coefficients are calculated. So these are the coefficients calculated. And after calculating the coefficients, I have reconstructed the picture using the computed coefficients. Okay. So once you compute that, you can see that this is the picture of the cameraman image reconstructed. And the interesting point is, if you remove certain elements from the array means here, I have stored my coefficients to this array ARR. This array having certain elements that represents the wavelet coefficients. That represents wavelet coefficients in each row. So wavelet coefficients means this is a distribution of arrays. That means psi j k. So this is the wavelet at the jth resolution and translated amount k. So jth element stands for the intensity of that particular wavelet. So you can remove certain values from this matrix so that you are dropping certain information, and you can efficiently create the original image back from the frame from a less number of coefficients. That less number is the advantage of Fourier advantage of wavelet analysis over Fourier analysis. So we can reconstruct the signal or image back from using a certain very limited number of coefficients. So sparsity of the matrix is very much demanding when we use image processing application. So this is all about image processing tool in a mathematical perspective. Thank you very much.